I'm Dr. Jeff Curtis. I'm a professor of medicine in the Division of Clinical Immunology and Rheumatology here at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And I'm going to be talking today about a project that I and several of my colleagues in the Department of Medicine have been involved in that uses health information technology, or health IT, to bring to the clinic and to patients' homes the opportunity to track their health and to figure out how patients are doing at home using smartphones and other web technologies to be able to optimize clinical care. A few years ago, in about 2012, I and several of my colleagues realized we're really missing a dimension in the clinic of what happens to patients. If I see an arthritis patient, say with rheumatoid arthritis 4 or 5 times a year, patients are living their lives for the other 355 or 60 days of the year, and I don't really know what's happening to them. And so in about 2012, I and a few colleagues here, James Willig, Monica Safford, and others, developed a tablet app that runs on an iPad that would capture patient-reported outcomes, or really just how patients are doing, in a quantitative way. That's really relevant in a rheumatology field because we have this emerging concept of what's called treat to target. The idea is that we should be quantifying or measuring your arthritis, in this case rheumatoid arthritis. There's a lot of trial data out there and even some real-world studies showing that if you quantify RA, or rheumatoid arthritis, disease activity, and you change medicines to get people into low disease activity or into clinical remission, the patient outcomes are better. The problem is that in the rheumatology field, we don't often quantify things. In endocrinology, the endocrinologist may measure hemoglobin A1C, or we measure a blood pressure or your cholesterol, and then we make treatment changes in relation to those tests. This is a very new paradigm shift for us in rheumatology. So we developed a tablet app that we're able to do this in the clinic. And we've been using that now for a couple years in the rheumatology clinic. In fact, this is just one example of part of a medicine endeavor where we are collecting information in lots of clinics. So for example, in palliative care or in one of our infectious disease clinics, we're tracking how people are doing. That could be anything from how bad your arthritis is doing to what kind of pain are you in, what's your fatigue level like, feelings of inadequacy or helplessness or even suicidality. In fact, in one of the clinics, if you score below a certain threshold on a depression or even a suicidality scale, a social worker comes and within 20 minutes is standing there in person to provide the needed care. So this is a direct application of technology really impacting what's going on for people in a clinic setting. The limitation, though, is in fact just that. It's in a clinic setting, but patients live their lives mostly out of a clinic setting. So in the year 2013, we decided that we're going to embark on a new pilot project to be able to capture patients' data from them directly, not just while they show up in clinic several times a year, but in fact at home, using technology that they already have, probably in their pocket if it's a smartphone, or on the internet if they have internet access, and about 2/3 to 80% now of people do in the United States. So we have the ability to track how people are able to do over time. So at the present time, we have a project funded by PCORI, or the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, to go build a suite of technologies that will enable patients to track how they're doing over time. This technology, although we chose rheumatoid arthritis as the exemplar case of where we're going to start, it's really in no way specific to arthritis. People's pain and fatigue and their sleep and their physical function and their mobility, that's really cross-cutting. It affects people with just about every kind of chronic illness. And so we see this as just the first of many diseases that we're excited about putting in the hands of patients so that they can track their own health, that they can figure out how they're doing compared to national benchmarks or to people with their own condition that may be at UAB or other institutions, and ultimately to improve that care by then bringing that information back to the clinic, so that much as in the old days where patients with diabetes would show me a handwritten paper log, here's my blood sugars, and there are scratches and sometimes they miss and things like that, we're now applying that same kind of mechanism, not just to tracking your blood sugars, but lots of other health-related outcomes and symptom states like fatigue and pain and physical function, as well as some disease-specific instruments. So certain ways that we measure in rheumatoid arthritis in a trial or a registry type setting, we have the ability to deploy both those disease-specific as well as the more general mechanisms to help track people and figure out how they're doing and help them work with their doctor to design a treatment strategy that optimizes what's most important to them. So in terms of how data affects the real world, I think there's understandable skepticism on the part of physicians that if you're going to track a bunch of information and then present that to me and now I'm forced to deal with it and react to it, there may be some natural reticence on the part of clinicians, including myself. We don't necessarily want to know everything that happened to you since the last time that we see you. We do want to know what's important. We want to know what's going to impact your health. We also want to know what's important to you in the future to maximize. And so here's where I see better alignment with what I might care about. I want your RA disease activity to be in remission, but also to make sure that that is really consistent with what patients care about. And so here's where I think that that sets the stage for the discussion. Here's how I think you're doing, and I can give my opinion, but they're going to say, look, I've been tracking this, and here's how I've been doing. You know, I've been having a bunch of flares that without some quantitative data, I couldn't really have described to you in quite the same way. So that gives us a sense of the past. And then it helps us set an agenda for the future. You know, what's most important to you? You've got a couple swollen joints. Is that affecting your function? And we can talk about whether that's important to them or not, or whether there's some other goal that they want to spend the time that we have in clinic in perhaps a more productive way that actually speaks to not just, you know, the one disease I may be treating, but what fits most holistically into their overall care. And, you know, maybe we need to talk about a possible sleep disorder, and I refer you, and that's the best use of our time because that's what's really troubling you the most. I think that the opportunity to use this to look to the future and help align what I care about with what patients care about, but giving them a voice with data to articulate what's important to them is going to be incredibly valuable, and Health IT is going to enable that going forward. There's a number of other disease states, not just RA, that I expect this to be valuable. For example, I was seeing a patient who has arthritis and has psoriatic arthritis, but in fact was most troubled by his psoriasis skin disease. So he really was troubled by this, and I had seen him for the first time, and I had the clear impression that his treatments were not working well for him at all, and sort of expressed my interest in perhaps switching his therapies because clearly what he was on wasn't working well. In fact, he pulled out his smartphone and he showed me a series of pictures and said, you know, Dr. Curtis, it's very clear that while I may not be in great shape now on what I'm currently on, I really don't want to switch because look at how bad I was. And even using very low tech, this is his camera phone that he's showing me what things were like 2 and 3 years previous. This guy was a whole lot better, and I would have had no clue that that was the case, except he had digitally recorded his journey of his disease, and that absolutely aligned my thinking, and I said, you know what? This gentleman is very forward-thinking in keeping track of that, but we need patients to have the ability to do that, not because they think of it, but to put those tools in their hands and allow them to share with their doctor in a meaningful, in an easy way that doesn't require you to be so tech savvy that you have to be a wizard and using technology, but to bring that down to the level of people who may own a smartphone but don't want to use 12 apps to go figure out how to maximize their health in all these different domains. So this technology or this app that we've built is called RheumPro, R-H-E-U-M-P-R-O. And again, this is built in collaboration with a patient group called Creaky Joints. And Creaky Joints was started about 15 years ago by a patient with inflammatory arthritis who got to college and looked around and said, what are the resources for people like me, like those in my family who have the same kind of arthritis, whose mother had rheumatoid arthritis? How do I get what I need in terms of tracking my health, the education I need, the support in terms of education? So Precori has funded this technology that we call RheumPro, but I don't want that to be overly narrow because it almost might imply that this is something for people who have rheumatic diseases. In fact, that's not the case at all. This is, again, just the first example, and that's why we're so excited about the cross-disciplinary nature within UAB and even beyond on a national scale to work with this platform really for people who have any chronic diseases for which something like this would be useful. The other aspect that I think is also hopefully forward-looking is I see this as part of the wave of the future as a complement to the way that we traditionally do clinical trials. historically, the way that you would do most trials is, you come in for study visits, you may travel hours to come to the doctor, and then we only have data, for the most part, about when you come to the doctor, and if you miss a visit, we don't really know what's happening to you. I see that this mechanism of being able to collect data at home, like through our RheumPro app, or perhaps other technologies in the future, for any sort of trial population is very valuable, not to replace, but to really come alongside and fill in the gaps for how we normally do trials. And that's an exciting feature that we're building in the year 2015 and beyond to enable interventional studies as a complement to the way that we have historically done things, to help, again, know what patients are experiencing and feeling in the in-between times between their regular study visits with me. So the ability of technology to increase patient engagement, I think honestly, is unlimited. That could take the form of tracking their health. We have aspects of the technology within RheumPro that will consume biosensor data. So many people wear a Fitbit or a Fuel Band or a Jawbone Up, those sorts of things, and we want to have that as a data stream so that you don't have to have one app to track this and a different app to track that, but that all of these sources of data come under one umbrella rather than piecemeal how patients are doing. We want this really to be one thing, and in that way, we're excited about bringing in data streams where patients don't have to be filling out questionnaires or doing other things actively, but to simply take advantage of what the phone can track and know, and what health trackers that people are willing and able to wear and desire to share. The ability, though, to engage patients beyond that, I think honestly, is myriad. There's a technology called Kaizen. It was developed here at UAB to fill the need for education of internal medicine residents even when they were off duty, given the work hour limitations that we're all probably aware of. We now want to bring that technology to patients to say, how do we gamify patients' education and engaging in a social community? That's one of the benefits of linking with other people. That's why Facebook is so popular and Twitter is so popular. We're then bringing that to a healthcare setting, working with this patient community so that patients can mutually benefit from their interactions with one another. And in fact, some of our research team, like Monica Safford, who will talk a little bit more about this, she does a lot of work with community health workers in rural places where, it may be hours drive to get to their doctor here at UAB or elsewhere. So the ability to reach out through technology and engage, peer counseling or community health worker type resources, to me, the potential is really unlimited to take some of the things we've done in traditional settings and to make them more efficient and make them more accessible through health IT.